What's up everyone? Today we're gonna go over the 11 Omnibus, yes, that's how you say it, I think. 11 different Omnibus that I've read over the last 6 months. One of these is a deluxe, not really an omnibus, but that's what we're gonna go over. We've got way more DC than Marvel. We're gonna try to correct that this year, but let's get into it. All right, quick caveat before we dive in. I am currently reading Hellblazer, and so I wouldn't consider that. I'm not gonna rate that as part of this. That'll be in the next one in maybe 6 months. But this is, I'm gonna tell you right now, this is kind of a slog to get through. I'm 150 pages deep. It's 1,300 plus pages in this Hellblazer. When they start talking about demon stuff, that's awesome. When it's not, boring. And again, I am not some kind of expert connoisseur. I am getting back into comic books after a hiatus since I was like 8 years old. All right, so the way we're gonna do this is that I'm gonna go through each one of these, tell a little bit about why I liked them or didn't like them, and then I'll rank my top 5 at the end. So I think we'll go ahead and get started with the Daredevil that I just read last week because it's fresh on my mind. And man, this is my first Daredevil comic that I've ever read. Can you believe that? And I just fell in love with this character. This is the Brian Michael Bendis Malieve run. This is volume 1 of the Omnibus. And it took a little bit to get into the art style that is Malieve's style. A little bit different than what I'm used to, especially after reading so much DC and like main event type of DC. But I think it really matches well, like the grittiness of Hell's Kitchen, New York, and like Daredevil's grittiness overall. This was such a good run that I'm already ordering volume 2, which is on back order. So many of these Daredevil omnibuses are on back order and out of print. Like, try to find Ed Brubaker's volume 1 of Daredevil, and you just can't find it unless you go on eBay or other sources and you pay about 1.5 times what it's actually worth. But I'm really excited to get volume 2. I pre-ordered it and it's in the mail, so I'm kind of reading stuff that I can read without going on a long journey. So I'm kind of doing one-offs like the Hellblazer, and I'm gonna give that one another 100 pages before I call it. I wanna give it a fair chance because I know you wanna set up the character a little bit. But if not, I'll probably run over to the Ingal, not even do DC or Marvel, and just go into one of those like classic, just historically significant deluxes. But this, I can't say enough. Like, I'm so obsessed with now just like Daredevil, anything. And this was a really great introduction for me. I know I have to read Frank Miller stuff. This is my first time ever reading Daredevil, so I have a lot of reading to do. So let's do the other Marvel Omnibus that's on this list. And this is the Secret Wars Omnibus. And I won't lie, I got into it because I saw those action figures were coming out. The ones that are up here got Beyonder and all that stuff. And this was really a fun read. And I knew this was something that they needed to, I believe they were trying to get toys. And they know toys was the moneymaker, and they wanted to make new things, something exciting and a big crossover event. And man, this really killed it for them. And you just learned so much. Like, I think Storm is leading the X-Men at this point. And you've got like, I think it's so funny how they all interact with Galactus. It's just like they're so insignificant to him. And then you got Doom being super doomy, and then you get the introduction of the symbiote suit. Like, this, so many interesting things and like classic things that are still happening. Like, the ramifications are still impacting what's happening in Marvel now. You have to read this book. If you're into Marvel comics, you have to. And I don't know if you're into like, I don't know, what is it called? Not Golden Age, Bronze Age? I don't even know if it's Bronze Age, but it's 80s style art. And that's, I mean, I had no problems with it. Spider-Man, my favorite run was, my favorite like panels were like when Spider-Man just cooked the whole X-Men in one scene. That was really cool. But definitely check that one out. All right, now I want to talk about the omnibus that got me into Omnibus. I'm going to keep using Omnibus as if that's the real thing. I hope that's really the thing. So Omnibuses, I'm going to keep using it. So Hush is what really got me into it. I just heard Jeff Loeb, Jim Lee, and that made me come back into comics after an enormous hiatus. And this is my first omnibus ever. I have compendiums from like other, actually, that's a lie. I have AVX. So I used to just dabble, just dip my toe in for certain events, and X-Men is my favorite, so AVX I had to get in. But man, Hush, I really loved the main run from Jim Lee and Jeff Loeb. That was phenomenal. And each character, it's because Jim Lee's the GOAT. He's my GOAT, man. Each character is drawn the way I like, how I envision them. And you have like the whole set of villains make an appearance in this thing. I feel like the whole set of main villains make an appearance here, and it's such a cool run. The art is amazing. The main story is beautiful. But I will say the omnibus in its entirety, it felt really long. It became a slog. Like you felt it once Jeff Loeb was not writing the stories that you were reading. It was a pretty severe drop-off for me. I'm not gonna like throw shade at any other authors or anything like that, but for me it felt significant when like it wasn't the main Hush storyline anymore, and it was just other Hush stories that are collected in this omnibus. But I will say it was fun. It was worth the read. I just wish it was a little shorter, just a little bit shorter. Or you know what I should have done, user error, I should have just collected the absolute in the main story. I think that would have been the W there. So if you're collecting this, I would recommend, my amateur opinion on it would be get the absolute. The omnibus was overkill for me. And towards the end, I was like, God, I want to just get through this so I can read something else. So then after Hush, my daughter was seeing me read this all the time. So I was like, I want to get a Batman story that my daughter can read. My 6 at the time, but my 7-year-old daughter can read with me. So I began reading the Batman 66 omnibus to her and my son. And she really enjoys it. My son's 3, he doesn't care about anything. But this is a really fun omnibus to have, to like break away from like long runs and you just want to read something silly and really 60s style. It's really well made, really funny callbacks to the original show, obviously, because that's what the whole thing is. And the art is I really dig the art. I don't know. Ooh, do you hear that? Sheesh. Someone didn't break their omnibus in. It's really funny, and you can even see times where what's his name, Cesar Romero, he would have, if you don't know, in the original show, he just didn't want to take off his mustache. The Joker, the guy who played the Joker, Cesar Romero, he just didn't want to take off his mustache. He's like, nah, I'm not gonna do that. So they would paint over his mustache, and in the art you can see that there's a mustache under the white paint, which I thought that was kind of funny. But my kids really get a kick out of it, and it's super kid-friendly. So I would recommend this for parents who want to read with their kids. So then I was told to read the event that started all events, sort of, the Crisis on Infinite Earths omnibus, or is this the deluxe? This is the deluxe edition. And as you can see, I'm a fan, because I collected all that run from McFarlane, and this was, if you don't know, was an omnibus or an event that was created in order to kind of consolidate and make it more attainable for new readers, because there was just a lot of universes, a lot of things happening, so they wanted to kind of bring it into one, make it like a jumping on point for some new readers. And just the art from George Perez is just so cool. I really dig the 80s style, his 80s style, I'll say, not all of them. But I don't want to go into spoilers, but if you're into DC, you have to read this, because everything seems to kind of call back to this. I've read another couple events since here, and I've seen a lot of references back to this. Kind of builds upon keystone events like this one. So from there, I actually went to the JSAs, but let's just go into the Infinite Crisis, which is what an event. This omnibus is huge. It's enormous, and I didn't feel like it was enormous. Like I could have kept consuming. If there were more pages, I would have just kept going. This was such a fun read, and it builds upon certain events that have happened in the past. You could go into this blind because they could give you enough contextual clues to figure out kind of what's happening, what happened with Dr. Light and Sue and mind wiping and all this stuff, and ethics behind all that, and what kind of split the team, who's kind of on what side. You can go into this and get everything you need from it. That's what I really like about omnibuses. My personal opinion, the whole thing with the Spectre, I thought was, I don't know, forced. It didn't make sense to me that he would just go insane and be so easily influenced just because he's not tied to any sort of corporeal form. That seemed a little soft to me for the magnitude of what happened here. Just kind of, oh, we need a reason for magic to just not be involved right now. All right. So that was my thing with it, but I still had fun with it. I definitely recommend it. It's still one of the best events that I've read. Not that it's a lot, but definitely like that one. So from there, if you recall in the Infinite Crisis omnibus, that there's a section in there where they have the Secret Six. That's written by Gail Simone. That made me pick this up. I loved the parts with Catman and the Secret Six and Deadshot. And this one kind of, there is some double collecting between this and this. And I just kind of mowed through it because this was real fresh in my mind when I picked this one up. So there's still a good chunk of it that's not collected here. And I would definitely recommend, if you like that, there's more of it here. And you know, Ragdoll, he clears all the other characters. He carries. I'm such a fan of Ragdoll and the way Gale writes him. The stuff with, this may be controversial, but the stuff with Birds of Prey, I could not care less about. Like, I thought it was kind of written, the dialogue seemed a little clunky to me, but outside of that, I really loved this omnibus. Like, you got Deadshot, Scandal Savage, who's the daughter of Vandal Savage. You got Bane towards the end. You get two or three pretty long runs towards the end that include Bane. And then you got Jeanette, who's like in the last two adventures with the Secret Six. So there's always six, but the six aren't always the same, if that makes sense. The main ones are Deadshot, Catman, and Scandal Savage. So spoiler alert, and the artwork by Nicholas Scott I thought was amazing. I really liked it, and the coloring. This was a fun read. And this was a good read on the heels of like Batman story where like, God, how many times do these villains have to kill people or do something horrible before you just fucking shoot them in the head? This is good therapy for that, because they do, and I like it. All right, like I said before, I jumped from, I think, Hush to this because I was collecting Geoff Johns. I wanted to see what he was about, and I'll be honest, volume 1 was hard to get through because all of these guys were new to me. The only ones that I was familiar with were like Green Lantern, Jay Garrick Flash, who else? That's it. From this cover, that's it. I didn't know Our Man. Atom Smasher, I heard of him from the Black Adam movie, which I think got overhated. The Rock sucks, but whatever. Dr. Fate rules. Is he even on the cover? Where's Dr. Fate? Well, he's on the back, but Dr. Fate is one of my favorite characters ever. Such a complex character in terms of like ownership. Who's in it now? Is Naboo dealing with all this stuff? So it was like, I had to take notes. I had to take a notebook and just write down who was who, because they would refer to each other as their aliases, then their real names. And I'm like, who the hell is all this? And then you got like Liberty Bell, and you got like Sandman, and the Star Spangled Kid, and then the Star Spangled Girl, and then the first portion of this is just setting it up. Like, who the old guard was, and then the next generation. A lot of the next generation is a lot of family, and then there's other pieces where it's just like, oh, it's their sidekick or their sidekick's kid or something like that. It's very interesting how they get to the new generation, because they know like all these old heads are just like, even Star Spangled Kid is such a verbose name, and it's like not the 1950s where that title really sounds cool at all. So that was like the setting up. I kind of read this as like it's the pilot episode, but then there are things that happen in here where you're like, oh, that's kind of cool, like the stuff with Mordru, and I forgot his other name, I think it's towards the tail end. Like their villains are really good. Like that's what I learned through all this. Geoff Johns really knows how to bring in a villain and kind of like, this is someone you got to deal with. So that was volume 1. Then volume 2 kind of goes into some more dynamics. Oh, this was my first introduction into Mr. Terrific, which I think is just he's such a badass. I really like Mr. Terrific. The Jakeem Thunder stuff is kind of corny, I won't lie. But the concept of like the genie and the magic words, it's kind of interesting. I really liked I think Black Adam, you see more of him in this one. And I really like Black Adam, because again, I'm tired of like, just let these enemies go just for them to break out and do more chaos. Black Adam isn't about that. And then he recruits some folks from the JSA to start his own thing in Kahndaq, his ancient stomping grounds, where he decides to set up shop. And that becomes a whole thing, and that was really fun. And you also see Onimar Sin, who's like from Thanagar, I believe, and he's a big badass dude that I think he shows up again in volume 3, or he shows up in Infinite Crisis. I can't remember, but he's a big baddie, and he was a really cool villain. So, and then you get some new dynamics with Our Man, and then Rex and Rick flipping and flopping, and there was the robot one in this one, and the dynamics between Hawkgirl and Hawkman, where they're eternally supposed to come back together, but Karen is kind of not about that life anymore. So I think it's really interesting. I really dug it. Then we go into volume 3. So in the middle of 2, I believe I had to run over to Hawkman Omnibus, also by Geoff Johns, and because there was something happening in, I think it was, I want to say New Rochelle or something like that. It's basically the DC universe of New Orleans, and lots of things happening, and you got the Gentleman Ghost doing certain things, and you learn more about Hawkman's background as an architect and who he was in previous lives, and visiting his old stomping grounds in Germany, and who he was before that. You go into his whole background with like Naboo and Black Adam or Teth Adam, and who originally killed them, and why he's perpetually coming back with Hawkgirl. This is a must-have if you're into the whole JSA thing. This is actually kind of hard to get. I was lucky I was able to get it in a lot. So I definitely recommend picking this up if you're into JSA stuff. And Hawkman is like, it's like Wolverine with wings, man. That guy's savage. And then volume 3, I had to cut over from here to Infinite Crisis, because things from Infinite Crisis were happening in here. Lots of things, lots of change happening. Not covered in the Omnibus. I had to kind of go research myself, because it went from like Mr. Terrific being the chairman to then Power Girl being the chairwoman. And Karen Saunders was now in Justice League, and different Flashes were taking part. So it was all sorts of kind of chaos that I had to kind of catch up with. But overall, this was a really fun one. I think you finally get the ending of the whole saga with Black Adam. You've got the whole villainous group happening here, with Black Adam being pulled in by Lex Luthor into the Infinite Crisis, into that society. And you also got stuff with like the Legion of superheroes from Superman's past coming in from the future. You got Starman, who's hilarious, probably my favorite character in this whole book. You've got Gog, One World Under Gog, that was a really great run. And then you got Magog, you got them trying to then also transition to yet another generation of heroes with like Commander Steel, and potentially bringing back another old JSA'er that things were happening with before. I really thought this one was better than the second one, in my opinion. I thought a lot more fun. Things were happening, and you get the whole origin story for the Gentleman Ghost and his whole thing, and I thought that was actually really interesting. It went long, but I thought it was good. So now let's go ahead and rank the top 5. All right, so number 5 is Crisis on Infinite Earths. I have to say that this was such a fun read. I hadn't read a DC event up to this point. So this is my first endeavor in that, because I kind of wanted to read it in order, because I know DC kind of builds upon certain things. I had no idea after reading those events subsequently that they do really build upon it. I would feel kind of lost if I didn't read this before any of them. So many different things, so many callbacks to things that happen in this event. That's why it's number 5. Why it's not above these, just preference. I had fun reading all of them, mainly these 5. So that's number 5. Number 4, we have Secret Wars. So coming into this with fresh eyes, never having read an event earlier than this from Marvel at all, I thought this was just really fun. And you get a certain view in time as to how these characters were perceived at that moment. And Spider-Man, you could tell he was a much loved character, because this is like Spider-Man at like the peak. This is peak Spider-Man. He, like I said before, he cooked the X-Men by himself. And then you got Dr. Doom being just like such a jerk to the villains, like such a jerk to everybody, but he just doesn't give a shit about the villains at all. And they're all like, what the hell, you're one of us. Especially like Doc Ock and who's the other one, and Kang the Conqueror, which gets like KO'd like immediately. It was kind of funny. He gets brought back, you know how things work. One thing you should know is that you don't see the Beyonder. Like, I know this this line of toys that recently came out and has the Beyonder in it, but you don't see a physical humanoid person named the Beyonder in here. It's just a voice calling from like the void. But he's super powered, and he puts them all on this planet, like this war planet that's been compiled by a bunch of different things. You get some new characters that you still see today that were created within this battle world and different things. This was really a fun read, and it was a quick read. I wanted to keep reading more, but that was it. It was a quick event. So when you leave me wanting more, I'm a huge fan. So that's why this one's number 4. Coming in at number 3, we have Infinite Crisis. This, again, was such a huge Omni, but it didn't feel like it at all. We have everybody coming in. You got JSA folks, JLA folks, you got none of those people, all of those people. You got people from different worlds coming in. You got callbacks to things that happened in Crisis on Infinite Earths. So I would definitely recommend reading that before coming into this. There are also other things that you could have read coming into this too that would give you even more context. Like I think Identity Crisis was one of them. But this gives you enough in its entirety that you can read this just coming in and then leave and you're satisfied. And I really appreciate those kinds of omnis. So this is one of those, and the art is just phenomenal throughout. I really enjoyed. I already gave you what I kind of didn't like, but it's all fun. Like you get Ragman. Ragman is in this guy. If you don't know about Ragman, read this. And then you get like different ragtag groups doing their own parts that are completely isolated from others, but are all towards the same endeavor of trying to stop things that are happening. And you think one thing is the imminent doom, and it's actually not that. It's actually this other thing that's ran by this dude, but that's not that the dude, it's this other dude. So it's really, really cool twists and turns all throughout, and you get a really good look at the JLA and how they operate. And during a time that things aren't running so smoothly for JLA. When are they ever running smoothly? But like, this is my first time reading Wonder Woman since Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I'm like, when the hell could she fly? I thought she had like a invisible jet. So I chat GPT'd, what happened to her invisible jet? And they're like, dude, that's like 80s, dude. Don't like, maybe even 70s. They're like, that's old. So she's like overpowered. Like she's insane. She's a really fun character. So that's why this one is number 3. Number 2, we have Hush. And this was perfect. Like if we were just talking about the Hush storyline, the main storyline with Jim Lee and Jeff Loeb, this would be number one. But because of all the faff, I'm gonna call it faff, this did not leave me wanting more. This led me to want to read anything other than Batman, because it went through like a few authors after that, and it was just not the same momentum. It was just anything written with Hush in it. I know that could be user error too, is in this Omni. And granted, there are some things that are after the initial story arc that are interesting, like things with Poison Ivy was interesting. It wasn't my favorite, but I thought it was good. Essentially that, like that. And I think Hush at the beginning is a great villain, but after that, you're kind of like, all right, we get it. You kind of get over it. You know what I mean? Like it's a bit much. I can't gush enough about the initial story. That's why I'm saying it's number 2. So I feel like I'm shitting on it, but it's number 2. So I really liked it. But for that reason, this one's number 2, which means that Brian Michael Bendis, Daredevil Volume 1 was my favorite Omni of this group. This one, I could not put it down. My wife would catch me reading this in bed. He's like, oh my God, you're almost done. I went through this in like 3 days max. I could not get enough of it. The way he handles everyone knows his origin story, and I'm glad this doesn't like dig into that. We all know how Batman became Batman and Superman became Superman, Daredevil became Daredevil. But again, this is my first time reading Daredevil, and the way he handles all the different, like, you can hear people when they're like lying, you can tell what they had for breakfast, you can do all these things like that with the juxtaposition of like the things happening in court and the grimy things happening on the streets, and his exes come into play. A quick spoiler alert, it's gonna be a 3-second thing and then you can come back, all right? So come back after 3 seconds, spoiler alert, his identity gets leaked. All right, now we're back. That whole thing happens. So this one, I really enjoyed the pacing. Like there's a new mafia guy coming from another family joining the fray, and he wants to make a name for himself, and you know how that ends up. And the viciousness that Daredevil fights with, like he doesn't pull punches. Like he's not trying to kill you, but I feel like if you die, oh well. But it's kind of him going through a crisis of a lot of things happening. It's him dealing with the trauma of one of his exes dying a while ago that hasn't left him. Things happening in the public eye, him defending a fellow street level hero in court, and something awful happens. Like it's all kind of bubbling up to something, and it's how he deals with that. So I really, really, really enjoyed it. This was my favorite Omni that I read this year, and I can't wait to get into Volume 2. So right now I'm kind of biding my time reading these other Omnis, but I just really want to get back into more Daredevil. So that is it. Thank you everyone if you watched for this long. Look forward to more action figures and comic content from me. Please like and subscribe. Thank you so much. I will see you later.